3.
Sauda bint radiallahu anha. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala has commanded me to marry only with the women of paradise. Aisha radiallahu anha said, I did not wish seeing any women except Sauda bint radiallahu anha if I could be in her skeleton. The first lady to enter the household of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam after the passing away of Khadijah radiallahu anha was Sauda radiallahu anha, who was obedient and generous and loyal with a sense of sacrifice. Aisha radiallahu anha was very impressed by her simple and selfless nature. She was among the first to accept Islam, and also had the distinction of emigrating twice, first to Abyssinia and then to al-Madinah. Her life is a beacon for all Muslim women. Her mother, Shamus, was from the tribe of Banu Najjar, a branch of the Quraysh. Her father was also from a branch of the Quraysh, Banu Amr bin Lu'ay. She was married to her cousin, As-Sakran ibn Amr, and then married the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam on his death. All her husband's brothers, Suhail, Sahil, Hatib, and Salit, had the honor of being companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Both she and her husband accepted Islam in its earliest days, and they both had the distinction of migrating to Abyssinia for the cause of Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, joining the second band of migrants. They were blessed with a lovely boy whom they named Abdur Rahman. They stayed in Abyssinia for a considerable period of time before returning to Mecca. One day, Sauda radiallahu anha dreamt that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam entered her house and caught hold of her by the nape of her neck. When she told her husband about her dream, he interpreted it to mean that after his death, she would marry Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sometime later, she had another dream. She saw the moon descending into her lap. She told Sakran about this dream as well. Again, he interpreted it for her. His death was imminent, he said, and she would marry the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A few days later, he fell ill and passed away. She was left lonely, and it seemed as if there was no purpose to life. One of her friends was Khawla bint Hakim, the wife of Uthman bin Mad'un. One day she visited the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and remarked that he was leading a very lonely and sad life with the responsibility of bringing up his 4 daughters and was missing his wife Khadijah radiallahu anha. He replied that she was right and that Khadijah radiallahu anha had been a remarkable and great lady. She suggested to him that he should get married. He asked who he could possibly marry, who would be willing to take on the responsibility of his household and daughters. She replied that she had in mind a certain lady, and if he agreed, she would approach that person. On learning the identity of the lady, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam agreed. Khawla radiallahu anha was very happy that her suggestion was accepted and immediately went to see Sauda radiallahu anha. She told her that she had great news for her. When she heard of the proposal, she was overcome by the honor being bestowed on her. But she said Khawla should also discuss this matter with her elderly father, who was going blind. Of course, her father was only too happy that his widowed daughter had been chosen to be the companion and wife of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Khawla then visited Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam with the good news. Soon the marriage took place and Zam'a performed the ceremony. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave a mahr of 400 dirhams to his wife Sauda radiallahu anha on the occasion. Her brother Abdullah had not yet converted to Islam and was very upset and saddened by the news. He expressed his grief in a barbaric and uncivilized manner by throwing dust on his head. Later, when he converted to Islam, he realized his mistake and how disgracefully he had received the greatest honor possible to himself and his family. Sauda radiallahu anha was of course very happy, having moved into the house of Khadijah radiallahu anha, where Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam lived with his daughters, Kulthum and Fatima radiallahu anha. She felt she was very fortunate that now her future was assured. She would often relate her memorable experiences in Abyssinia, and talk especially about his daughter Ruqayya radiallahu anha, and her husband Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anha, and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would listen with great interest. On one occasion, Ruqayya radiallahu anha visited Mecca. The sisters received her with mixed emotions of joy and sorrow. Joy on seeing her after so many years and sorrow because they were meeting each other for the first time after the death of their mother. Sauda radiallahu anha stepped forward and embraced Ruqayya radiallahu anha. Ruqayya radiallahu anha and Sauda radiallahu anha never expected that they would be meeting again after their days in Abyssinia, now as mother and stepdaughter. But it was a very cordial relationship, and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was extremely happy to meet his daughter and son-in-law. He got news of the latest developments, of how the refugee Sahaba were faring, and of the position of the ruler of Najashi. The social conditions in Mecca continued to be bad, the Muslims were cruelly treated and oppressed, and the disbelievers were not prepared to change their policy. Every day brought fresh stories of torture and harsh treatment of the Muslims, and the only alternative appeared to be migration. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, keeping all these circumstances in view, now decided his followers should migrate to al-Madinah. A few days later, Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala ordered him to migrate as well. So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam set out on his sacred journey, in the company of his most trusted companion, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anha. On reaching al-Madinah, they stayed over at the house of Abu Ayyub Ansari. Once he was settled, he sent Zayd bin Haritha and Abu Rafi'a to Mecca, with some camels and 500 dirhams, to bring all the members of his family. These two trusted companions reached there, and immediately left for al-Madinah, with Sauda, Ruqayya, Kulthum, Fatima radiallahu anha. Ayman, the wife of Zayd bin Haritha and his son Usama, also were part of the caravan, which was put up at the house of Haritha bin Nu'man Ansari radiallahu anha, on reaching al-Madinah. During his stay in Mecca, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had married Aisha radiallahu anha, who now came to live with him in his household. Later, at different stages in his life, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam married Hafsa bint ʿUmar, Zainab bint Hajash, Salma radiallahu anha, and others who had the good fortune to be associated with him. It was an age when the desert of Al-Madinah bloomed into a garden whose heady perfumes seemed to have enchanted the world. The pebbled streets of Al-Madinah became the focal point for all believing Muslims, and the axis on which the whole Islamic world revolved. The bustling activity and the liveliness as a new city-state evolved were magnified by the charismatic presence of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Even the angels seemed envious of these early Muslims, and the role they were playing in spreading Islam across the world. And the angel Jibreel alayhi salam visited this glorious city many times. When Sauda bint Zam'a radiallahu anha became old, she feared that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would divorce her and a settlement be made. Her desire was to be raised on the Day of Judgment with the other members of the Prophet's Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam wives, so she said she would entrust Aisha radiallahu anha the time allotted to her. It was at this point of time that ayah of Surah An-Nisa was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if a woman fears cruelty or desertion on her husband's part, there is no sin on them both if they make terms of peace between themselves, and making peace is better. 4-128. Aisha radiallahu anha was very touched by her gesture, and they became even closer than before. Her heart was so pure that it was totally free of jealousy or malice. Sauda radiallahu anha was a tall, healthy woman with a sense of humor. Ibn Sa'ad mentions how once she was offering voluntary night prayers, standing behind the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The next morning she told him how his very long prayer made her fear that her nasal vein would burst and her nose would bleed. So she said that while in the bowing position, she held onto her nose. This comical image that she presented of herself made the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam burst into laughter. She was a very warm and simple person. She had a slow, lumbering walk because of her build, and when she went with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam on Hajj, she took special permission to leave from Muzdalifah earlier to avoid the crowds. Aisha radiallahu anha, who was also part of the group, later wished she had also left with her since she really enjoyed her company and missed her liveliness. Sauda bint Zam'a radiallahu anha. When Sauda radiallahu anha first heard about the Dajjal from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she was terrified. Being the simple person that she was, it became a hobby for the others to talk about it, and frighten her, and then laugh at her. On one occasion, Aisha radiallahu anha and the mother of the believers, Hafsa radiallahu anha, started talking about it in front of her. She was so scared that she immediately ran into a dark room full of cobwebs to hide from the monster. When Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam walked in, he found the two enjoying the joke. He asked them what was so amusing. On being told what had happened, he called out to Sauda radiallahu anha to come out as there was no monster around. She came out sheepishly laughing at herself. On one occasion, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Aisha radiallahu anha and Sauda radiallahu anha were sitting together and chatting. The former cooked a special dish and offered it to the latter, but she declined. Aisha radiallahu anha was a lively young person, and threatened to force-feed Sauda radiallahu anha, and when she continued to remain serious, she actually splashed it all over her face. So this light-hearted gaiety and spirit of camaraderie was very much part of the Prophet's Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam household. There was no malice and jealousy in this pure atmosphere. It was reflective of the pleasant ambiance in the household of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where there was always a loving concern and affection for all. But when the call to prayer, or adhan, was given by the mu'adhin, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would immediately rise and leave for the mosque as if he did not even know the family members gathered around him. The history of At-Tabardi, Kamil of Ibn Athir, and the Sirah of Ibn Hasim have recorded an incident that occurred after the victory in the Battle of Badr. The triumphant Muslim army was on its way back to Medina with many prisoners. Among them was Suhail bin Amr, the brother of As-Sakran ibn Amr, the first husband of Sauda radiallahu anha. He was under the care of Malik bin Dakhtham. On the way, he told his captor that he wished to relieve himself and managed to escape. When the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was informed, he asked the army to stop and ordered that the escaped prisoner should be captured or shot where found. The mujahideen fanned out to search and soon found him, hiding behind a tree. His hands were bound together and tied to his neck. In this state, he entered the city. When Sauda radiallahu anha saw him, she involuntarily exclaimed that he should have died a noble death, rather than live to see such a shameful day. She did not realize that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had heard her. He told her that she was stirring up the prisoner against Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala and His Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. How could the death of one fighting against the forces of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala be noble? She was very ashamed at this and immediately apologized, saying that she just could not take what she had seen and blurted out what first came to her mind. She said she was really loyal and obedient to the will of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala and His Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and was sorry if she was offensive in any way. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ relented with a smile and announced that the captors should treat all prisoners with consideration. The result was that the Mujahideen first fed the prisoners in their charge and then ate themselves. And ultimately, because of this kind treatment, many disbelievers, among them Suhail bin Amr and his brothers, converted to Islam. After the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ farewell Hajj, he told his wives that they should remain in their homes as it was the will of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, and stay in your homes. 33-33. Thus, Sauda عنها and Zainab bint Jahash عنها did not travel after the death of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and they stayed in their homes in Medina, saying that they performed Hajj and Umrah in the company of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and would follow the command of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Sauda عنها was extremely generous. During his rule, ʿUmar bin al-Khaṭṭāb عنها sent her a bag full of dirhams. She asked what it was, and on learning that it was money, she was very surprised and said this was like dates being packed in a bag. She then distributed the money among the poor and needy. There are 5 authentic ahadith attributed to her, according to Imam Tahawi. She narrated how when one of their goats died, they used the skin until it got worn out. Thus it is proved that it is permissible to use the skin of a dead animal. Similarly, in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, the following hadith is attributed to Sauda عنها. A man came to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and asked if it was possible to perform Hajj for his aged father, who could no longer undergo its rigors. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ asked if he would pay his father's debts if he had any, and if this would be acceptable. The man replied that it would. Then Muhammad ﷺ told him that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala was oft-forgiving and most merciful, and he should perform the Hajj on behalf of his father. The caliphs who succeeded after the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ death thought it a great honor to look after the welfare of the mothers of the believers, and diligently did their duty by them. Sauda عنها lived to the ripe old age of 80. She passed away during the caliphate of ዑمر bin al-Khaṭṭāb عنها and was buried in Jannatul Baqi. As Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala says in Surah Al-Fajr in the Noble Quran, that it will be said to the pious believers, O the one in complete rest and satisfaction, come back to your Lord, well pleased yourself, and well pleasing unto Him. Enter you then among my honored servants, and enter you my paradise. 89, 27-30.